Welcome back to Performance Lab. I'm Dr. Michael Donovan, and today I'm talking to Rachel Ellery, like celery without the C,
You got it.
a licensed occupational therapist, strength and conditioning expert, and movement specialist who's built a career helping people transform their health from the inside out. She's the owner of Ellery Coaching, where she's guided hundreds of clients through personalized strategies that actually stick. She's also the co-founder of Tailored Health, a company using blood work, DNA, and lifestyle data to create precision supplement solutions, basically making science work for you. What I love about Rachel is her journey. She's quit her business 3 times in 2 years before doubling down and building something that really works, not just for her, but for hundreds of people. She's lived the parts of health, fitness, and entrepreneurship, and she brings that experience to every client, every decision, and every innovation she's part of. So if you've ever struggled with figuring out how to make a transformation last, whether it's in your body, your mind, or your business, Rachel has been there, and we're going to talk about that today. So thanks for being with me today, Rachel.
Thanks, Michael. I'm so excited to be here.
So I told a little bit of background there, but why don't we just start with kind of the relevant parts of your story and wherever you want to go with that?
Yeah. So I just went to a networking event. Actually, well, it was a conference, but I feel like we all just went into these summaries of our lives, and it is funny when someone asks you where you start, where you go back to. So for me, it seems to go back to way earlier than I think when I'm start telling this, but I'll make it short. So I was someone who was a first generation college graduate. My parents did not go to college. They were corporate. They got jobs very young at PepsiCo, stayed kind of in that corporate bubble, and didn't really understand how to navigate me into that world of education. And I was an only child. So for me, it was really just observing kids in my neighborhood and their sisters and brothers going to school. "Where are you going?" And they said, "This school." And so I was like, "Okay, I guess I wanna go to that school." So I just really was piggybacking on a lot of people's lives and growing up because I really didn't have my own compass of what that looked like for me. So once I got into college, I started to explore my own interests, and I did that with help of advisors and just, being immersed in curriculum, but it started to gear more towards therapy or helping people. I knew those were things that I was interested in. My advisor at Michigan State, we originally were planning on a physical therapy route because I was involved in athletics. I'd never really had an injury and gone through anything like that, but it just kind of made sense, right? And then I shadowed a physical therapist, and by gosh, I have so many PT friends and I'm very invested in physical therapy, but where I was and in the clinic I was in, I was like, this is not for me. Bend, flexion, extension, just very biomechanical. And I'm a much more, I would say, creative, and I needed to be in a little bit different pot. So that's when I got guided into occupational therapy, which was something I had never heard of, and I was like, "What even is that?" And so here I was going on this track of something that I didn't really understand, but what I did know was that it was empowering, and I did know that it was creative. I knew that it was centered around helping people live more independent and capable lives, and I feel like that is a very central value to me and who and what I believe in and why I'm on this earth. So I was like, done. This is what I'm doing. I don't know what it looks like. So I went to grad school at Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Very, very good graduate program. And I was like looking around. I'm like, why why am I here? Who am I? All these people have wanted to be OTs for a long time, and I just kind of walked in there, and it was really humbling to be honest with you. It made me really buckle up, I feel like, and take things a little bit more seriously. And I was really inspired by my classmates, and I think it made me work really hard. So I did really well in grad school, and I really enjoyed the curriculum and just the multidisciplinary approaches that I was learning about and being a team player. So I got out of school, went and worked in the hospitals, Spectrum Health at in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I floated all over the place in all the settings, and after about 4 years, my roommate threw me a retirement party. I texted her one day and just said, "I just sat through a 40th year anniversary of a physical therapist in our department, and I cried at my desk." And I was like, it wasn't because I didn't like what I was doing. It wasn't it wasn't anything like that. It was more about, is this it? Is this is this all it's gonna be for the rest of my life? I really felt I really felt like I needed to be in a little bit different exploration of my career. So I did what every confused 27, 8-year-old person does is I did something really impulsive, and then I did another impulsive thing, which was take a 2-week trip to Europe. So I did that with that said best friend, and beautiful trip. I just spent a lot of time reflecting, and my next path was going into working with people with disabilities in the gym. So, meanwhile, it sounds super impulsive, but really, I'm still staying in an umbrella of like, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do it in a very different way. So, I started working with MS populations, specifically in the gyms that I was a part of at that time. We drew in some traction because I had a very, very special woman who I can't dive too deep into because I'm going to start crying and ruin your whole podcast. But she really inspired me to want to pursue this path very intentionally, and we built this beautiful relationship, and she still messages me today, 6 years later, and shares where she is in her journey and how it's incredible. So, I moved to Denver, Colorado in 2021, and I was on track to work with a specific gym who was specializing in working with these diverse populations, neurological, spinal cord injuries, and I was like, "This is incredible. I wanna be around, I just wanna learn from these people," right? I know I don't only wanna learn from these coaches. They were really not, medical professionals, but I wanted to learn from people who were immersed in the coaching realm, because I think different relationships are formed in different settings, right? There's a lot of red tape in the healthcare industry, unfortunately, and there are so many beautiful and necessary things about it. But at a certain point, it came down to, well, what happens when you fall out of a wheelchair and you can't get back in? Are you going to have the ability in a hospital setting to spend 45 minutes figuring out how to get back in your chair by yourself? And the answer is no. So, what I loved about it was this time that was spent, and it was just like a, "Hey, we're here. We're gonna sit with you in this struggle, but you gotta figure this out." So, I worked closely at a place called CrossFit Watchtower with Kevin Ogar. He had a spinal cord injury. I believe it was in 26, no, it might have been around that time, 2016. I apologize, Kevin, if I got that wrong, but he is fantastic at transitioning a lot of these populations from their outpatient setting to, what do they do after that? Where do they go? How are they supported in these community fitness, programs? So that was where I was for about 6 months, and COVID was happening still at that time. So it just really wasn't conducive to building a career at that time for me. I was moving to Denver, making very little money, paying a lot of money on my student loans, as you probably understand that, Michael. And you're just really not set up to be able to, I think that straps you with a lot of fear around, how can I make something feasible? And we end up really sacrificing a lot of our, I'd say, value and expertise because we feel we have to. And I just I was like, there's got to be a different way. So that's where I pivoted again, and I really, again, impulsively just started my own business. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know. We took one business class in graduate school. And really, that class didn't equip you to start your own business. It was more exploring the opportunity of what you could do, which I appreciate. But I'll tell you, healthcare providers are not really encouraged to go outside the box and start their own practices, because why would they be? You know, so we can talk more about that on another podcast.
One of the themes that runs through a lot of the guests on my podcast is pivots. And you may not realize where that pivot is going when you make that decision, but where you are now, all of this is context. It's really important. And you wouldn't be doing exactly what you're doing right now without any of these pieces. So even though you don't necessarily see what the pieces are assembling when you're putting them together, in order for the full picture to make sense, you do have to understand all these pieces. So
You're
back
so
to you.
right. Yeah, and you're exactly right, and that's why I tell this story the way that I do because there are no pieces of that can be left out to determine like to where I'm at right now. It's always emotional to recall because like you said, you don't have any idea what's coming after what you do. But when you look back, you're like, "Oh, it all makes a lot of sense," you know?
And I think it's a really important theme to highlight because one of the things I emphasize with the clients I work with is they're often worried about like 6 months from now or a year from now, or, especially now, like longevity and health span. And, I talk about fit span and all these kinds of things. And we're talking years and decades ahead. And how about just step one where you are to step two, it's like A to B, and don't even worry about EFG, forget about XYZ because we don't even know what we were going to see. It's like walking on stones into the fog and we can't even see beyond the step right in front of us. So
Exactly. And, I'll tell you before I get back to where I was, I really believe that that is one of have you taken the Clifton Strengths Finder test before? One of my probably my top skill that is always highlighted is flexibility and adaptability. I saw it in the hospital setting. I'm very, very okay with letting go of a plan or not even really having one going in because I want to remain very present. Especially working with people with disabilities in the gym. Think about it. Someone comes in with a neurological diagnosis that they've been living with for a very long time. They might wake up and have a terrible morning. And if they show up and I have this plan and they're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Well, if I pout and get upset because my plan isn't gonna like that's not helpful to that person and it's not helpful to me or my growth or creativity either. So I always go in with what I say an outline, maybe something, but really what the core is like, what does this person need? Where are they at right now? And how can I meet them to get something out of this? And I think that that has carried me into coaching very well and really getting at the core of what's important. So coming back to coaching. I didn't know what to call anything. I mean, I hung up on every little detail of I can't start this because I don't have a name for it. I mean, Michael, I ended up with our Ellery or Rellery coaching because it's like, listen, I'll worry about it later. I don't need to, at the end of the day, this is not important. I'm just going to start. And that took me a really long time to get over is not having the perfect outline, not having the perfect website. You go all over social media or pop around Google and type things in and you're like, man, these people have these beautiful, like, presentations, and I don't have any of that. And how am I gonna get that? And what do I even want it to look like? And you get so caught up in these details and to where it could really paralyze you or deter you from starting at all. And it almost did. So I call myself a recovering perfectionist. Perfectionism is something that I have really battled with in my life due to some wounding from when I was a kid. And for me, being able to, I'm gonna say, to step over those barriers is something I'm really, really proud of myself for because it still bothers me. It still bothers me that it's not all perfect, but also it can't be. It's never going to be, and it's always evolving and growing. So starting, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I should be doing. I didn't know where to start and I didn't know what I needed. And I had to walk through that for 6 months to a year of just the swirling and the cycling. But in the meantime, what I did know I needed to do was get experience. I knew I needed to work with people. I knew I needed to learn from people. And, I did that by offering free services or having what I would call guinea pigs of like, hey, this is something I'm starting out with. I would love some feedback. I want to start to understand what a system looks like and how to build something that is helpful to someone. And in that process, you learn so much. And I think so many people, one big miss when people start things is they focus way too much on what their value is. It's like, well, I need to charge X amount of money for me to open my mouth or share or give. And it's like, you really need to humble yourself when you start something because you do have a lot of value and you do have a lot of expertise. However, that doesn't matter if people aren't going to vouch for you or if you don't build relationships with people who actually see that, right? Because it's just like when starting a business, if you could have the best product in the world, but if it never gets seen or never gets used, no one cares. It doesn't matter. So that was a lesson I had to learn was, a lot of times you just have to give away some free value, and that's really really beneficial because it's actually not free. It comes back to you like tenfold. So, you know, if I was summarizing the last 3.5 years of my business, it is just like, I can't believe it. I truly look back and I'm like, "How did I get here?" And there are still so many pieces that I'm like, I still don't even know what I'm doing half the time. And I think that's a really important thing to say. It sounds like something you probably shouldn't say, but I'm gonna say that even from a medical professional standpoint, when I got out of school, do you wanna know what the number one relatable slogan in the hospital was? "Fake it till you make it." Fake it till you make it. Terrible, terrible. You think about that and you're like, "Oh my gosh, people are putting their" but what I think that's actually saying, it's not saying fake safety. It's not saying fake your knowledge or your and it's not saying any of that. What it is saying is you are not going to know everything or every circumstance or how this is going to play out. But what you can do is show up and gain the experience and learn from your mistakes because mistakes are going to happen. So, growing a business is a lot of that. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of trying things, seeing what works, and then having to recycle and reform and be okay with that because things cannot stay the same. And I think if you're going into it thinking that it's just gonna be this like, "Oh, I'm done. I've created this thing that works. It's gonna stay this way forever." Well, you're probably not gonna run a really growth-oriented or growth-minded, type of practice where you're actually helping people as they grow and evolve too. So yeah, I've been coaching for 3.5 years, and it is a more integrative coaching model. I work a lot on the holistic person, which involves a lot of mindset and that word really being just, if we unpack that, a lot of reflection, a lot of ownership, a lot of reframing. I think that that's a big piece of things too, is making people aware. I think when you get somewhere, especially in the practice of your own life, you forget that people don't know what you know. You forget that people are beginners, and there is a amount of having to step back and practice a lot of empathy for that because I look at someone like my mom. We went to the gym together last year in November, and it's so easy to tell people just exercise and eat this and do that. Well, we walk in the gym and she's clung to my arm and she's telling me, like, what am I going to do when you're not here? What am I going to do when you go back home? Because even though I've showed her, even though we've walked through it, it is very intimidating. It is very difficult because there's so many pieces, there's so many layers. There's skill building in all of this. So that is the value of coaching, is breaking those skills down, learning those habits, learning those mindsets and frameworks around having a very solid base and structure that you build onto, and not having this expectation that you should just be there or that it's just going to happen. And that's a really hard part because some people are at the very start of that, and that's really exciting. but it's very overwhelming and very confusing. And I really try to come alongside people and support them in that and validate that because I've experienced that not only myself but with people I love. It's very heartbreaking to me and it's something that is very real. And so yeah, I think that's what the core of my coaching is in helping people gain that solid foundation. And we're still talking about my story. So just a real quick sidestep, I got involved in a startup space, which was another avenue that this is one of the lessons I think that I reflected in coming into this chat was just saying yes to opportunities. I think having an opportunistic mindset is key for everything in life, but especially in entrepreneurship, because if you're not saying yes, you're not going to know what's a no. You're not going to know what's for you or what's not. So for me, everything is like, yeah, I have no idea what this means. I have no idea what this looks like. But guess what? This could turn into something. And if it doesn't, I gained a lot of experience along the way. So that is how I approach life, and that's how I approach entrepreneurship. And I think that's what makes me really excited about it all the time. It's just an opportunity. Everything is hard. You just have to choose your hard in life. And for me, I look at those hards as lessons and opportunities. Again, just perspective. So the startup space was like another arm of massive, just everything is everywhere. There's no structure. It was perfect for me because I'm like, hey, I'm used to that. Throw me in. I don't need a plan. It really worked for the releasing the pressure of having to have this knowledge or organization around something I wasn't familiar with. You kind of build it as you go. It's like Legos. Yeah, now it's turned into 2.5 years later, 4 iterations of a company, and myself and 2 other partners have built what is called Tailored Health, and we have a awesome product, which is personalized supplements that are derived by your DNA, your specific genes, and it's a full genome sequence, so we identify polygenic risk factors and take in the medical and clinical side of things, combined with your lab work, so labs are going to change over time, and those are data points that we can continue to interpret alongside your genetic components and risk factors. And then lifestyle elements. So, what are you doing in your life? What are your goals? And what's showing up for you? Right? It's usually going to be reflected in your DNA and blood work, but it's all just a comprehensive picture to design something that's more specific to you. Because the reality is, you can walk down in a grocery store, a supplement aisle on both sides of overwhelm and confusion and have no idea what to take, how much, and I think it does kind of fill that action breeds action. It's not the end all be all solution. It's absolutely not. There are other pieces that need high level of focus like diet and exercise and your psycho-spiritual health and all of these pieces. But it is an element and it is something that is important for a variety of reasons. So yeah, it's something I've like learned a ton about. I love creating and gosh, that's where I'm at.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have for people who love your story and love everything else we talk about today. I want to just ask who for your individual coaching, who is the best, who's your ideal client? Like who do you really get the best results with? So if someone who falls into that core category is listening, they're like, yeah, that's me.
That's a great question. In business, especially in the coaching world, everybody encourages you to niche down, niche down, niche down. And I'll be honest with you, it's really been advantageous to me to not niche down. I'm a little bit of a rebel also. Like the more people tell me to do something, I'm like, is that really me? Does that really fit me? I'm going to stay authentic to what I believe is best for me. So I've stayed very open. And what that's brought me is a wide variety of people. I've worked with athletes who are 16 years old pursuing high levels of fitness, and they're going to need very different things than another client I work with who is 75 years old and just trying to work on home exercises and dietary adjustments, right? And I hate I the question is difficult because that's a huge span of people. that's again why I love it so much because it's a huge span of people and I'm a connection um oriented person. I believe that when coaching, and this won't work for everybody. That's not going to work for everybody. But for me, I love it. Male, female, young, older adults pursuing anything. If you are pursuing longevity and in health span, and I say both as in living longer, but also living well and living independently and living capably. I believe that everyone should be met with a different subset of focus, and I feel very well equipped to come alongside someone and help them in whatever avenues they're pursuing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking earlier about being independent and capable and creative and empowering, I I looked up synonyms for the word maverick because that's the one that came to mind, and it said individualist, rebel, free spirit, innovative, lone wolf. And I was going to ask you if you feel more because you were just at a longevity conference over last week, and that's an interesting group. It's kind of, I would say, like a group of hipsters where they're counterculture, but you've created enough of a culture that everyone within the culture kind of believes the same values, right? And so you're like a group of rebels and counter thinkers. So yeah, when you said rebel, I thought, yep, I could tell that from the time I met you.
And I'm in and it's a respectful rebel, right? There's a place for all of this. But I think if we're not asking critical questions and thinking critically through things, then we're really missing the whole point. Even going to this conference, I listened to there were 500 to 600 of the top practitioners in the United States there who are actively working with patients and who are just thought leaders in this industry who are sharing a lot of information. And you could hear one person very confidently talk about something and another well-respected person completely throw all of that away. And I think those huge pendulums, I call them, the extremes, are really important because what they do is force you to think about the far ends of what am I missing and what am I experiencing and what am I seeing versus what I'm not, because all we really know is what we know and what we've experienced. So it's not that anybody's right or wrong. There might be a more wise or unwise, but there really is no right or wrong in my perspective. And I think that hearing those far sides of things allows someone like myself to do what I typically do, which is fall somewhere in between. And then when I hear something that's really far on one side, I'm going to push back and hear, whoa, wait a second, though. What about this? And it allows me to think very critically and enable and empower other people to ask those questions because it's so easy to just hear someone speak very, very confidently and be convicted to buy those messages and not really explore the other side of that. So that's why I appreciated that conference because it's like, wait, wait, wait. I just heard like the complete opposite thing in the other room. Now, who do I believe? It's like this fun
Mhm.
little
Mhm.
thing. But, that is health, right?
Well, let's talk about that. I'm going to characterize it as the in between. I was going to say the gray area, but it's not a gray area. It's because things aren't black and white, right? So it's not that has the wrong connotation. What we're talking about is like extremes of freezing and boiling, and we're in the sweet spot in between where most of us want to be, right? It's kind of a bell curve where there are these extremes, but we live in a really polarized world, whether it's politically or health wise, right? Where we're throwing out moderation, things extreme, you know, and it's, I think we're defining ourselves often by what we are against rather than what we're for, which I think is dangerous in and of itself. And then also I think the other thing I'm seeing more of is recurring, like returning. We're seeing the things go in like 30-year cycles, and we're seeing like a return to things, which is 1995. So I don't know if we want to time travel back to 1995, right? But CrossFit has run its course in a way, and now we're back to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman, bodybuilding and physique workouts, and medicine has progressed and progressed and progressed, and allowed us, as someone who's a physiologist and science based, worked at NIH, like in technology. I mean, in the startup, it wasn't a startup, but um, companies like Moderna being able to, in less than a year, I'm not concerned about that, develop a vaccine for a global pandemic, not because they like started it when they said, hey, here's a contract. They'd been doing that for a decade, right? There was a long runway before that. And so, but we're throwing out medicine for biohacking and for functional medicine, quote unquote, medicine practitioners, right? I'm not against any of this. I think all of that serves a purpose. But
Mhm.
I was actually just talking to my brother over the weekend, who's a physical therapist, and I'm having a little knee pain. And I asked him, after I do a workout, and if I'm feeling some swelling, should I ice or should I heat? And he said, I had an older brother growing up who said, always ask why.
Mhm.
And I was touched that he quoted quoted me. But and he said, "What is the purpose of the modality you're doing? Right? Are you trying to increase blood flow, or are you trying to diminish blood flow? Right? And inflammation."
Mhm.
And like that mic drop, right? Like that's just you ask the why, and if
Exactly.
you ask the right question, then the answer is apparent. And I think we're trying to be so divisive and place it. It's either or and sometimes confirming what I already think, right? But instead of being curious and instead of being open and flexible as you were describing.
I love what you just said because it went back to asking questions. One of the biggest things I've learned in my career evolution at my what I consider very young age of 34 years old, I am so excited to be in this place that I feel so young and also just like so excited for everything ahead um in whatever time I'm gifted here, but like just to be in the awareness of how powerful question asking is. And to that point, we're just throwing out all these answers. Somebody raised their hand, asked a question, it's an answer. Well, I think there are more questions that need to be asked to figure out why are you asking that question? What for what purpose? And to your example as well, just like with the conference, it was so apparent that those providers who were very, very confident in what they'd experienced, there was an answer for that. But I could argue and say there were probably more questions to be asked. So I kind of got this picture in my mind as you were speaking. It's like this line, this continuum. It like did this. We're going on the forward trajectory. Here's 1995. We're going forward, and then we've done this little loop, and then we've started back somewhere a little bit ahead of that start, right? And then we're going again. And it's just all these like little loops on this straight line that's still moving forward. Maybe it's going up a little, right? Hopefully. But I think that's actually such a powerful picture to me because it says, hey, all of these things, like we said, matter. They should be explored, they should be heard. But I'm taking in all this information about very dense, very, very deep diving into labs and biomarkers and all of these things that are important. But when you really step back, the solutions, the basics, all of those things in bulk are are still the same, right? Like the solutions are still interconnected in like a very I call it like a zoom in, zoom out. You got to zoom in to be able to zoom out, and I like a kaleidoscope. The zoom in is really important, but the more I see, the more I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I gotta step back here because how am I actually gonna help this person? How is this actually going to apply to people? And I think we constantly as providers need to be asking that question because you can know all you want, but you might be limiting yourself in what you actually know.
Right. Right.
Sometimes you'd be willing to listen, to ask better questions, and then trial and error and be okay with that.
Yeah. I like to say conviction with context. So,
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that holds people back sometimes, it's really frustrating. Like if you ask a specific question and the answer is it depends, and what are you hedging against? You're the expert in this field. Like tell me what you think. I'm not going to come back to you and say, you were wrong, Rachel. I just want to know, what do you think? But I think also answering too quickly and being too specific without zooming out. And I think sometimes I frustrate on the other side when someone asks a very specific question and I think I know what the answer is, but I want that context, right? And so I zoom out and I'm like, I do want to answer that question, but I also want to understand why you're asking that question and the context around that, because that could really determine what the answer to that question is.
I also really like that you highlighted it depends because if we're really thinking about it, it depends is a very safe answer to be considerate and respectful of all the experiences and possibilities. But to your point, you and this is something I had to learn and I'm still learning is I can still have an opinion based on my professional and clinical and all the other education or applications that I've practiced. So I'm allowed to have that, but what I've started kind of saying in addition to that sharing of information is a both and instead of depends, because I think the both and kind of validates or shares, hey there, I'm not saying that this is the end all be all because that's what scientists really should be saying is that we're all collecting data and these are based on variables that have a lot of implications around why this showed up the way that it did, which could be changed by other variables depending on a million factors. So I think that that's why it depends is such a safe answer because science is so complex, right? And it's so fun.
Right.
Yeah.
I was something I wrote down earlier when you're talking about coaching is we in medicine and faking it before you make it is until you make it is we talk about practicing medicine and practicing law and even practicing yoga, right? But then somehow we have the gall to be like the hubris to say, I'm a coach. I'm just coaching.
Mhm.
We're not practicing coaching, we're just coaching. And we're like, are we updating our algorithm, right? As we learn new things and incorporating new things in.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to say this on this podcast right now because I don't think coaching has gotten the if we look at coaches, well-respected coaches in a variety of industries, look at the top NFL coach, highly respected, right? Dan Campbell. I'm a Lions fan. We love Dan Campbell, right? A fantastic coach. We look at Ted Lasso. He's a fantastic coach. Coach
Fictional, but albeit, yeah, it's still great.
but the and what I'm painting is, like, a coach can have a lot of impact, a coach can have a lot of and despite not knowing everything, Ted Lasso, great example there, but I will admit that when I was and this was my ego, 100% my ego, was feeling like I went from a, master's degree licensed medical provider with OTR after my name to coach. And that felt like I just got thrown into a sea of people to pick through because people can call themselves coaches without any back and credentials aren't everything either by any means. That doesn't mean anything. But what it did do was make me think a lot about what is my title and does it matter? And what am I trying to identify myself as? And it created questions of identity for me. And it's something I'm honestly still working through of what am I? What am I doing in a career sense? But it is a fascinating, exploration of how grippy we are with our titles, our credentials, our knowledge, what we're providing and what those mean to people. That was just a little sidestep, but maybe you can relate to that too.
Totally. I just jotted down when you're saying that this is off the top of my head, but a hierarchy of what I think makes a good coach. And I would have to, I was thinking of coaches like us. So I don't know if it would be interesting to talk to some NFL coaches and see if they also think this. But I think the number one thing is holding space.
Yes.
And like a teacher, right? When you take a CrossFit class or a yoga class or an academic class and the teacher walks in and you're like, okay, we're ready to do this today. Just the way they walk in, right? And then how they engage with the people in the room, and then curiosity. And I think that also extends to all of the people I was just describing, and then experience, and then
Mhm.
authenticity, and these
Yep,
may be a little out of order, and then knowledge, and then education or credentials,
totally.
right? That's like 6 on the list.
Yes. I would also throw in, like, support. I think that, if I think about I gotta still talk about the Lions because, guys, we're gonna go to Super Bowls here, but if we look at the Lions, for example, if you look at their last several years, 2021, I mean, our record was horrendous. We had the worst probably NFL, I think we had the worst record for, and I'm from Michigan, for many, many years. And now we're on track to potentially be in the Super Bowl. And Dan Campbell has been the pivotal turnaround within those last few years and his team, right? But what you see is his team plays hard for Dan, and they talk about that. And of course, it's for more than Dan. But the reason why they are so fired up, passionate again about showing up is because someone believes in them. It's all about someone believing in you. I'm going back to TED too. It's like on the wall, right? You have to hold space, you have to be supportive, but you also just have to believe in your people and they have to believe that you believe in them. Because I do believe that you can't believe in someone more than they believe in themselves, but I do believe that you can be a reflection in a mirror for someone to say, "You are capable. This is possible for you." And sometimes people need other people to help them access that for themselves. I know I did, and you have to choose that. But if someone doesn't believe in you, it's a really it's a really big wound, I think, to overcome. And when someone does believe in you, it's transformational.
It's interesting you're saying that because I was actually just last night talking about this, that I've I started off, I'm a physiologist and performance coach and generally the health and fitness realm. And I've started recording my client conversations. And it's my favorite reason for that, other than getting a transcript and the logistical things, is for them to see in a very short amount of time how their energy presents differently, because I see it, but they don't always see it. And so a before and after picture is great, but a before and after video where they see that they're just showing up in a more confident way, just their identity has shifted. And part of that, I think, as coaches is us seeing that in them and drawing it out. And they may not even see that within themselves, but because it goes beyond why they came to us, as coaches. But as a good coach, you see the potential in your clients that they might not even see themselves, and you're able to do the things to draw that out of them.
I think that's the superpower of a coach. I think it's the ability, it's not about potential. Potential is very different. It is seeing, and I don't think we should be living with the idea of a potential person. I think we need to be looking at the person and see what the opportunities are that they have for themselves today. And with that, there's a lot of power. I've talked a lot about low-hanging fruit. There are so many things that people can do today, right now, to talk better to themselves, to support themselves, to regulate their nervous system, to go outside, to get some sunlight. Like those little things, again, that action breeds action, just can liven someone, right? And they don't even know what's around them to do that. And also just who they're surrounding themselves with, being able to talk to people about what their environment looks like, how impactful that is. And when you have someone making you aware of that, and then now you see it, you're now empowered to make different decisions for yourself. Because now, once you see it, you can't unsee it. But if you never saw it before, how could you expect someone to change? Like, it's a whole, I've been in therapy a very long time. Love my therapist. I think it's so important, especially when you're working with people. I think it's easy to neglect your needs and yourself because you're pouring so much out. And I had that recognition where I'm like, man, I really need to create some space. And in that space, it's just been wildly helpful for me to be aware of my own blind spot, to become aware of my own blind spots, and then help take those tools to help other people be aware, because awareness really is key, because then it becomes more aware, it becomes more prevalent, you see it more often, and then eventually it's just like, hey, I'm standing right in front of you, you can't ignore me anymore, and then you have to make a choice.
I want to talk about a little bit about inspiration and motivation and the role that they play. And so maybe both, I mean, this is a great kind of segue from you need to treat yourself in the way that you want, your clients to treat themselves, right? Modeling that. And so maybe speak to what inspires and motivates you, whether it's as an athlete or as a coach, and then how that might translate into your clients. And obviously that's not enough to be motivated and inspired, right? But I think it's a critical piece to build on. It provides a foundation that keeps people, plugged in and keeps people on the right journey.
Yeah, I love that question. Always in all of my intake forms, when people come to work with me, I have a very comprehensive intake process, because I want to learn about not only their goals, I wanna learn why. Why is this important to them? What drives them? Because if you ask that question once and then you ask it again and again and again, you probably get at the root of where someone's pain point exists and what they're scared of. And I think fear is a big driver in motivation. What inspires and motivates me is my fear, and I'll be transparent about this. My fear, it started as of watching 2 people who I loved and love, my parents, watch their health decline rapidly, watch them live out a life that they felt that they had to sacrifice a lot for, and including their health, their mental health, their physical health, and realizing that I didn't have to make that choice for myself, and it scared me. Their health deterioration and how they struggle throughout their lives, I didn't want that for myself. So, talk about pendulums, I swung the opposite direction, and that's also been something I've had to work through in this grip, this control element of how much am I holding this too tightly, right? How scared am I? And I think that there can be a healthy level of fear as we're talking about health, and it, how scared do we have to be to take action for things? But for me, what motivates and really inspires me is I just keep coming back to this word, but like capability. I just think that we're capable of so much more than we think we are. I I wanna be a brave and courageous person. I wanna inspire people that they can be brave and courageous too in their lives, not just for themselves, but for the people around them, and how it has ripple effects when you live out a life that you're really proud of and that you show up for imperfectly, because you're never going to have all these pieces firing on all cylinders at the same time. But it's almost like a puppeteering or a volume dial, where you have better recognition of when something's suffering. You can give it a little bit more nurturing and more attention. And that's all this is. It's like a juggling game forever and ever, until that baseline just elevates a little bit more and a little bit more. And I really want people to know that there is so much opportunity. And if they stop fixating on the barriers and really step out of what I call like a more of a victim mentality of everything is happening to me, these are all of the hardships, in well, what can I do? What could I do to pivot? And those pivots we talked about earlier, I think apply for everybody, and they're small. I've been insecure at times in the last few years about not really having goals. Even when I was a therapist, a traditional therapist, and developing goals all day long, every day, they didn't really resonate with me. And I don't want to diminish the value of having a goal. I think it's absolutely incredible, especially if that's something that resonates with you. But I placed a lot of pressure on myself to have a defined goal. For me, it's okay to just live and to just be, and to just be present with exactly where I am right now, and ask myself, like, am I okay with, am I happy? Am I content, not complacent? Like, all those questions. And again, I just think that inspiration, motivation can often like lead to goal orientation or what drives you to work hard towards something. And I don't know. Sometimes I think that that's not entirely the whole point. Like you don't always have to be striving and pushing, and you need to be kind of like that straight line, those circles that come back. You do have to push and you do have to work hard and you do have to recognize your blind spots, but you always do have to come back to a point of nurturing and settling in and reflection so that you can get clear and then keep moving forward.
So with that said, you are visibly at a high level of fitness,
Yeah.
and you just trained before this call. So without goals,
Yeah.
what keeps you at a high level? And
Yeah, that
what can someone who, because I think we're at a good place to wrap up our conversation for today. I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where to find you, but I want to end with some takeaways. So all of this is great. It's conceptual in a way. I mean, it's been a really good conversation. But like, okay, what do I do with this? Right? Some might be thinking. So I want you to tell listeners what keeps you going, and then what are a few things they can do maybe if they're just starting out and they're not
yeah.
necessarily ready to hire a coach, but they want to keep going, and they were writing down some goals because we're beginning to get to the end of the year and they're thinking about what they want to do next year, and they're like, but Rachel said I don't need goals. So like
Yeah.
make sense of this for them.
Totally. No, I often it's like what I talked about earlier, when you get to a certain place, you have to step way back and remember where you started, and that came with a ton of hard work. And it's not that I don't work hard now, just to me, it's settled into a place which is far different than what I used to do. And what I used to do was I used to train very, very hard. I worked my tail off. Grad school, I was juggling that with training 20 plus hours a week in competitive weightlifting and gymnastics and a variety of skill training. So I think that it is extremely important to start no matter where you are, start with something, anything. But I think that's a hard to just enter in the worldwide web of fitness, nutrition, all these pieces that are circling. So, first I would explore what interests you. If it's a class, if it's a practice, if it's martial arts, if it's I don't care what it is, go to something that excites you and encourages you to move your body and to be present with something and to focus on something. One, because it's good for your brain. Two, because it's great for your body. And you're going to learn more by doing something if you enjoy it or not. Now, I do think you have to get clear also with some level of what a goal is. So when I talk about goals, it's not that I don't have any goals. My goals are just less specific. So I'm not placing a lot of emphasis on what percent body fat I am or how much muscle mass I have. What I am focused on though is, am I getting better? Am I improving in my performance metrics? Am I getting stronger? Because I am focused on getting stronger right now. Am I looking at progressive overload over time and steadily increasing those metrics? And if I'm not, I need to look at my training intensity or my recovery, my nutrition. I need to look at those elements and figure out what is lacking. But when it comes to starting, explore your interests, get involved, and give it some time first and foremost, and time being, I'd say, several months, unless you are very clear with the fact, like, I really don't like this. But even if you really don't like something, try to explore why and what friction you're having with it, because it could be discomfort, and maybe you need to step into discomfort. Because I do believe that stepping into discomfort is extremely, when you have tension towards something, you should be stepping into it even more. It was not easy for me to do a lot of the things that I did. I stepped into a lot of discomfort to build what I built in my physical body and in my mental state, right? Of being. So I would encourage you to also step into and lean into discomfort, fully reflect and explore on what tension you're experiencing and why. If it's, I don't feel like I belong, I feel worried that people are watching me. those are very different things than, do I enjoy this? Is this benefiting me? So explore that. Number 3, I would also just collect a few resources from people you trust, maybe someone you listen to that you resonate with, and maybe it's a home exercise program, or it is something that meets you at your ability of where you are, or again, maybe it's stepping into a group fitness. I think group fitness is incredible for entryway, because you learn what is a flow, what is a pattern, and then you can start to step into a little bit more of an autonomous forward direction if that's what you choose. But it can be a great place to start. It can be really difficult and overwhelming to step into something, but I think those were good places to start.
I
And
love
maybe
that.
and maybe make a list. Like, I would write it out for yourself and write down, and that, and be very okay and in welcoming to that changing, because what started out, might not be what you were actually interested in. And maybe exploring something else you had no idea you'd be interested in, you might love. So just keep your mind very open, and also be okay with the trajectory of your life changing those things. In a season of life or a season of time, you might love and be interested in something, and you can also change into something else. And I think that change and dynamic and fluidity of fitness, nutrition, all of this is a collection. And it's super important to dive into areas of things and not stay the same forever and ever and ever. You should be exploring all of it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, one of the tactics I've used over the last few months with most of the new clients I've gotten is just over the first 2 weeks, don't change anything, which is really counterintuitive for people that are like, okay, I'm ready to like, what do I need to change to get the results I want? And I'm like, I don't want you to change anything about what you're doing, not what you're eating, not the way you're training, not the way you're sleeping. I just want you to bring more awareness to that. And so take the earbuds out and stop listening to podcasts and just like walk or run or lift and be aware of how your body feels when you're doing that, and what it's like, and then if you're going to change something, maybe change the rest interval or change the speed that you're lifting, or change something that still doesn't really dynamically change what you're doing,
Yes.
but it's going to have a tremendous impact. And if you don't have that awareness from the beginning, we're going to get months in and you're still going to be just going through the motions, even though we've changed up your training completely.
Totally. I do want to speak to two things really quickly. One being, be okay with starting very, very conservatively in everything. I I can't tell you enough how important it is to not get ahead of yourself when you're starting on a journey, and to just ease in and be comfortable first, because comfort will then create the pattern of confidence. I can do this. I am doing it. And now I know I can do this. So now I can push myself. And you never want to start at a point of defeat where you've tried something and you're just I'm just not good at this because I can't do this, or I watched that guy do it and why can't I do it? Or I think I should be able to. The shoulds, take all that out. You need to start slow. You need to start probably further back than you think you do, and get really confident first before you build on top of that, because that's also going to train your brain and your body to have a lot of awareness and presence with development. And you're going to set yourself up for so much more success. If I could go back in time, I would have done that and gone slow. I came out like a torpedo, and I had to work my way backwards, and it cost me a lot of time, a lot of pain. And if I could do anything different, I would have slowed way the heck down and given myself time and been patient with myself. And that leads in with the second thing, is I would be very, to your point, Michael, aware and present with what inner narrative is going on in my head. Am I talking kindly to myself? Am I saying mean things to myself? And if I'm doing that, I need to change that. I need to say, you know, I need to acknowledge that's there, but I also need to comfort that, and with a lot of compassion and nurturing and encouragement, to say, you know what? I'm here. I showed up here. I'm really proud of myself for doing that. And it's not where I want it to be, but that doesn't mean you get to beat yourself up for it. And it's really just not helpful. So I think talking the way that you're hearing yourself, and you won't even realize what you're saying in your head until you are quiet enough to hear it. It was it was scary when I heard the reel that was going on in my head and I had no idea. And that awareness was like, "Oh no, that's very sad to me," right? So just be mindful of how you're talking to yourself, even if it's not audible or if it's subconscious. My last one, gosh, that led in. But I think those are two really, really good ones to leave with.
Absolutely. I summarize that a lot for clients saying, you would give your friend or even a stranger grace in this situation. Give yourself the same grace you would give someone else, and don't be so hard on yourself.
And it's a journey. It is a journey. It has to be a journey. It's not ever a destination point. It never ends. I say this to the people that I coach in person all the time at the gym. And I say, guys, and I do it with a little funny humor. I'm like, guys, isn't it so fun that we're all just going to show up here for the rest of our lives and we're going to keep doing this forever and ever and ever? And they think about it and they're like, oh gosh, that's like a long time. I'm going to have to keep doing this. But it's true. It's fun because this is a journey, and that journey is not easy, and but what it is it's extremely rewarding, and I think that that will far outweigh everything else that comes along with it that is difficult. We can't have we can't have true, I don't know, positive or growth oriented trajectory moving forward if we don't experience hardship or difficulty. So this can't come easy. I think that's a misconception too, is people look at someone like me and they're like, oh, this must be so easy for her now. She just wakes up and goes and gets her workout in before Michael. Guys, I don't exercise typically before that. I don't know. I don't wake up in the morning just can't wait to go to the gym. You know why I do it? It's because it's part of my life and a part of my routine, not because I'm so motivated and inspired to go every day. You do it because you do it. You just do it anyway. It's not about your feelings. It's just what you do.
Love it.
Yeah.
Great point. A great place to end. Rachel, how can people find you? What's the best way to reach out or find you on social media, website, those kinds of things?
Yes. So my website is under construction. That will be live again soon. And that should just be rellery.com. I've kept it very, very simple. And my handle being rellery, like celery, but with one L. And there is a form to fill out there. You can message me. You can also email me at rachel.ellery@gmail.com. But yeah, I'd even just love some, if anybody listens and has some stories or relatability or anything to share, I would love to hear from you and connect with you. I'm in the Denver area as well by Washington Park, so could go on a coffee walk.
Awesome. Any closing thoughts?
No, thank you so much for having me. I really look forward to future conversations and diving into more specific takeaways for people to leave with. But I'm super excited to be here. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Performance Lab. I'm Dr. Michael Donovan, reminding you that peak performance is a journey, not a destination. For more cutting edge insights and actionable tips, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and stay tuned to the Performance Lab.